Well, maybe. This hangout is live, it says. Well, howdy do. I am Tommy the Beer Whisperer. Let me show you that pretty beer. It's one that just came out in my neck of the woods. 6 degrees chocolate porter ale brewed with cocoa nibs. 5 point, gosh, my eyes just went blank there. 5.1%. It's a local brewery, too. We're somewhat local, not really local to anybody. They're out of Rolla in St. James, Missouri. Public House Brewing. There's the glass from. So, anyways, hey, the Beer Whisperer Pub is open, and I got a special guest um, joining me and pulling up a stool today is the one and only Bruguru. And if you watched the other episodes we've done, or the other sessions, I should say, you've heard us talk about him. So, John, you've got some special beers to share with us. So I'm going to let you talk about him.
All right, Tom. But before I do, I just want to tell you your house is on fire. So, yeah,
Very clever.
Nero fiddled while Rome burned, and Tom drank beer while his house burned down. So,
Right.
Actually, right now I am finishing up a Winter Hook. I've got this is this year's edition of Winter Hook from the Red Hook Brewery of Seattle and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And but the real treats that I've got coming, let me see if I can adjust the camera here and get you to see them. Okay, well, you can kind of see them there, but I'll bring them out shortly. But I got them lined up on the sidelines there, but I've got 4 years of Anchor Our Special Ale. So
right on.
That's one of my favorite Christmas beers ever. It's not the first Christmas beer I ever had. I had a German Weihnachts beer before that, and a Christmas ale from the Hope Brewing Company. They were a contract brewer in Rhode Island, and some Sam Adams Christmas beers before that. But really, since then, they have become, to me, the definitive Christmas beer. So I try and pick them up every year, and I try and keep a bottle around. I've got the 2012, 2013, 2014, and 2015. I've got three different Our Special Ale glasses, and unfortunately for one of them, it got stuck in a Anchor Steam glass because I ran out of Our Special Ale glasses.
Oh, no.
But that's what I've got coming up tonight. So,
Well, that sounds good. This is an interesting porter I've got here. I mean, like I said, I've never had it before. It's brewed with a local chocolate, Eskinosi chocolates, right here in Springfield, Missouri. So it's another reason I wanted to try it. It feels a little light on the mouthfeel, but it's got some flavor, a lot of big chocolate on the nose. It's also joined with just a tad bit of coffee, a whole lot of dark chocolate. It's mostly a dark chocolate feel about it. So you've been collecting beers. Well, maybe collect's the bad word or the wrong word. Would be the best way to put it? You've been a craft beer guy for a long time, and so you've been picking up stuff for a while. I won't call you a collector because you drink the stuff. So, what do you want to pop first?
well, I've got them all popped and poured. They're all
Okay. Well, hell, what am I talking for then? Why don't you go? I'm going to let you start with your tasting then.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go first with the. Let's find the 2015 in my menagerie here. Because the 2015 is the freshest, obviously. And I had this beer earlier at Taco Mac, and I've popped a couple of bottles of it. It was nice having it on draft at Taco Mac. I try to do that every year. One thing that they've done recently is they add the years to the to the beer listing, and that may not mean a lot to most people, but one of the things about Taco Mac is they have what they call Brewniversity, so you get a credit for every beer that you drink there, every different beer, and everybody wants to get to 1,000 beers, which is the that's the Brewniversity Chancellor. So that's when you get all kinds of special things and props. Really, at 125 beers, you get a beer mug. So that's probably the most important thing. But what I love about it this year.
How far in are you at the Brewniversity?
I'm at 715. So
wow.
After 35 more beers, I get a nice German style growler. big glass growler with the ceramic cap and the big metal handle on the side. So,
Oh, awesome.
but the 2015, I think this, they say this beer changes every year. The changes are very subtle in my opinion, but I think this one is bolder than it's been. I mean, it's really, it's loaded with gingerbread and eggnog spice in the nose. It's very piney. You know, it's like I've described this beer in the past as like kind of taking a bite of a gingerbread man hanging off of a Christmas tree and bringing a little bit of twig, you know, a little bit of the twig along with it.
Nice.
You get the spices, the nutmeg, the cinnamon, and it's really just it's a fantastic beer. So well done again, Anchor, on the 2015.
Right on.
So before I go and hit one of the prior years and see how it's changed, I'll let you talk a little bit, and I'll shut my mouth. So.
Well, actually, I'm going to make you talk again. Actually, what I wanted to ask you is you're one of the early guys to craft beer, and I recently started a website this year. I've been doing the YouTube beer videos for about 5 years now, but you've been on this thing for a while. How long have you had your blog or your website?
Well, I started my website in, I think it was 2005. 2005, but really I started writing beer reviews in the mid 90s on Usenet and on the Prodigy internet service, but mostly Usenet. And today it's funny because, you know, you can still research some of those old Usenet posts, and every now and then I find a review I wrote of a beer that I loved and is no longer around anymore. And that's one of the reasons that I do it. You know, people like to read about the current beers, and fads come and go. But I think there's a lot of value in going back and saying, hey, I remember that beer back in the 90s or the aughts or whatever.
Yeah.
And so if people read my beer reviews and they like them, you know, and they find value, that's great. But for a lot of reasons, I do it, you know, sometimes it's just for me. I wrote for ePinions.com after Usenet, and I published a lot of beer reviews there that I actually have transferred over to my website. But been doing this for quite a while, so you're not going to get. It's not for money. It's just for fun. So.
Yeah, that's kind of how I approach it too. I get frustrated with some guys that you could tell have become obvious pitchmen for beer. You know, that they're giving beers an A+ rating that are clearly not A+ beers, and you know they've been given free product. At this point, they're nothing more than pitchmen for the breweries.
Yeah, there's people out there, unfortunately, like that, and it's sort of like if you're going to sing for free beer, if you're going to sing the praises of a beer because you got a free sample. You know, I know you and Red have talked about this before, Douglas Smith, but it's very true. It's why we started Honest Craft Beer Reviews, because if you get a free beer and, you know, you say, hey, this is a great beer because I got it for free, you know, you're not going to come out and say that's the reason you think it's a great beer.
Yeah.
Then I can't trust your opinion, and I always am suspicious of people that review those beers, because it's got to be in the back of their mind that, well, you know, if I pan the beer, I'm not going to get, breweries are not going to send me samples if I'm saying the beer stinks, right? So
Yeah,
the gravy train ends, and yeah, for that reason, I'm not going to say I have received samples from breweries, but when I do, I clearly state it in my reviews. And one thing that you know, Red started that was a great idea was, you know, make a donation to a charity for the.
yeah, that is a great idea. Yeah,
and that's what I've done, you know, and I think it's because everybody wins. You know, the brewery they get their review. They know it's an honest review. So believe it or not, if you tell a brewery that they're making a beer and you think it's bad, you're helping them. You know, if I lie to you and say your beer is great when it's not, I'm not doing you any favors, because the consumer is going to vote with their dollars and they're not going to buy your beer.
yeah,
So,
and you're not going to be taken serious.
no.
And I mean, there's a few guys that I've watched. I mean, they're giving beers that are clearly not. You know, I mean, they're not great quality beers, but they're giving them an A+ rating, and you're wondering why that's happening. And once you've done that, I can't take anything you say serious again.
And that's exactly it. Your review is a waste of time. It's disingenuous. It is actually harmful to the consumer because you might be telling them to buy something that's not true to style, is not a great beer, and they get a misperception. If for some reason, sometimes people look at you as an expert, and if you betray that trust,
I agree. Yeah.
they may think that, hey, well, that guy's got to know what he's talking about, or that gal's got to know what she's talking about, because they do YouTube videos, and the brewery wouldn't send them stuff if they didn't know what they were doing. And that's not good. That's not the way it should be. So
No, I agree.
that's my opinion anyway.
So let me ask you, before we go on to the next beer, I got one more question for you here. I've been drinking craft beer for 30 something years, but I've only been doing the videos for about 5. And even with just that little bit of time, I've gone back and looked at some of my real early videos, and I've been wrong. Not on all of them, but every once in a while I'll find a beer. It's one I didn't like then. I figured out the taste now, where I liked it then, and my taste buds are not digging it now. Have you noticed that? Has this ever happened? You ever got back? Oh my gosh, why did I think that?
Oh yeah, anybody that tells you they've never pegged a beer wrong is lying. It happens to the best of us. There was a specialty beer Budweiser put out. My God, it must be 10 years ago, and I totally got it wrong. I don't even know what the heck it was supposed to be at the end of the day, but there's been other times too. We all do, I've yet to meet the person that can blind taste and exactly identify any, a lot of people, usually can get it within the style parameters. And that's pretty easy to do, but to nail a certain brand, sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. But be honest, you're going to make mistakes, and at the end of the day, it's okay, But I think what you really need to do is just slowly sip the beer, reflect on what your palate's telling you, and be honest that way. And if you do that, I think 95%, 96% of the time, you're going to get it right. So.
Yeah, and you can't ignore the fact that your body changes. I mean, your palate does change over the years. So what you might have really liked 10 years ago may not be. And it's also because I think there is so many new craft beers around that weren't around 10 years ago, that something you might have thought was absolutely wonderful 10 years ago was wonderful because there was nothing like it. Now there's so many other options. Maybe it's not quite as wonderful. It still may be a quality beer, but it doesn't light you on fire like it once did. With the fire behind me here.
Yeah, yeah, it's about to light you on fire, Tom.
I should be wearing red so I look like the heat miser.
Yeah, you kind of do there. I should be have a blue background so I could be cold miser there. But anyway.
Yeah. Hey, I even know the song. But hey, so tell us more about the Anchor beers.
Well, that was the 2015. I've still got a substantial portion of that beauty left. But let's go to the 2014, which is got a year of age on it, and it's a lot less robust in the nose. That's the first thing that you notice. You still get that gingerbread, but more of a chocolate chip cookie type character. I get the ginger and I get the pine too, pine and spruce. I don't know if you can see the label of the glasses is different on this one, but
yeah. I love the gold rim. That's nice.
Yeah, and they all feature that. And I've been trying to collect the entire set on eBay, but the problem is that in a lot of cases the gold rim is like really deteriorated. So this one is chocolatey. It's got I'm getting the light hints of the ginger, the nutmeg, cinnamon type spices. And it's still, after a year, it's remarkably good, but it's a little less robust than this. And I don't know how much of that is the aging. To be honest with you, I don't think a heck of a lot of it is the aging, because it's got a really beautiful bittersweet dark chocolate character that comes out in the finish that the 2015 had to a lesser degree, even though it had the 2015 seemed to have a lot more of the gingerbread and the spices and the spruce coming through. But I think this might have been a little bit, maybe it was a little bit less robust as a brew last year, but it's still good. I'll tell you, it's delicious. you can't go wrong with Anchor our special ale. So.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a classic. So other than craft beer, another thing that you and I have in common is we are glassware junkies.
Yes, that's right. In fact, I have I'm about to send you some beers, and I have a old Heilemann glass.
Oh, no kidding, Heilman. Oh, wow.
Which it's a Heilemann special export. It's a little chunky mug, and it's fantastic. I have one, and it's been one of the for some reason I really love old macro brew glasses that are like
I do, yeah.
you know
I do too.
eccentric. I guess is the best
Yep.
way to describe them. That aren't just like a normal glass, but are a little bit different. And I have one of these, and I stumbled on another one at Goodwill, which is the best place to find beer glasses here.
I agree. And the DAV, my wife has found a lot of my glasses at the DAV.
But I love to match brewery beers, and as you've seen, that's what every one of these beers, the Winterhook glass, the Winterhook beer I had in a Winterhook glass, and all of the three of the Anchor our special ales are in OSA glasses, and the other one's in at least an Anchor glass. So I try as much as possible to match beers up with brewery to glass, and I've got about 500 now. So I've given up on collecting a lot of things, but I love collecting glasses, and it drives my wife nuts, but that's probably why.
Mine too. The problem is our house is relatively small. We don't have a lot of cabinet space, and half of them are regulated to or relegated to my glassware. So we're trying to figure. I'm going to have to get a cabinet where I can put a lot of. I don't have a lot of them out because I just don't have space for them. A lot of them are boxed up, but I do rotate a lot of them in per style. I mean, I put all the Pilsner glasses back as we get into winter months, and I kind of rotate stuff in and out, so I'm not using the same glasses all the time. But yeah, I'm with you. I love to pair the brewery into glass like I've done today. And if I have the ability to do so, my OCD kicks in, and I have to do it.
Yep. OCD can be a good thing, by the way. It's not always a bad thing. So it can, push you in that direction where, I mean, I don't have to match the glass to the brew, but it bothers me when I don't. So
yeah, it does. If I have the ability to, or for some reason I can't find the glass, it drives me nuts. But hey, speaking of Heilmann, the beer my dad drank growing up was called Grain Belt.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And at one time, Heilmann was the brewer of Grain Belt. Now it's actually brewed by August Schell. But at one time, Heilmann was the brewer because I remember seeing that on the cans when I was a kid, looking at the Heilmann on the Grain Belt.
Yeah, Heilmann, they're gone now, but they I think their biggest claim to fame was Old Style, right? They did Old
Style, yeah.
They owned Old Style, and that was a very popular brand in the Midwest. Grain Belt was too, though. And then they actually, I think they put out a version of Tuborg.
Tuborg, yeah, I remember Tuborg. Yeah. I drank a few Tuborg back in the 70s.
It wasn't the the real Tuborg is from Denmark.
Yeah.
And they back in the 80s we used to drink we would drink Tuborg, and we would see the commercial for the Danish Tuborg, which would be advertised as the ancient beer of Danish kings. And then you had the Heilemann Tuborg, which was like $2 a 6-pack. And that's what we always called the ancient beer of cheap Danish kings. So,
well, I remember their commercial for about what you pay for the king of beers, you can have the beer of kings.
That's right. That's right.
That was their commercial. Yeah,
it wasn't a bad beer for those days.
No,
I have a lot of fond memories of drinking Tuborg. So, but Heilemann, I guess I think they merged with Stroh, and then they got bought by Pabst, and that's the sad side of the beer industry today is that a lot of these brands that were really important to our dads and their dads are gone. And I think today you see sort of the same thing going on with all the acquisitions. A lot of craft breweries are getting snapped up, and it was Breckenridge just got bought the other day.
Yep.
It's a fact of life. We're going to have to get used to it.
It does. It makes you wonder how long these conglomerates are going to keep these craft beers actually functioning. You
Well,
know, I mean, you have to, if you know anything about business, you have to believe at some point they're going to get shut down.
I
It's
don't think
coming
they
one
can
day.
do that though. I know a lot of beer geeks today are afraid that's what's going to happen, but I don't. If that was the case, I don't think they'd be investing the money to buy them. Because the funny
Well,
thing about craft beer is that it's when the acquisitions and mergers occurred in the 70s, 80s, and 90s for the mega brewers, and even those go on today. There wasn't a lot difference between Miller and Bud and Coors and Stroh and Old Style in those beers. They were mass market lagers, and
mhm,
really the I think the biggest difference between a lot of them was the label on the bottle. But today, if a craft brewer buys if a macro brewer buys a craft brewer, it's got to be with the intention of, I want part of that craft brew market. That's the only
yeah,
reason you would do that, right? So if I buy like Ballast Point, um,
mhm.
got bought, Breckenridge got bought, Goose Island gets bought. If you dumb the beers down, people will stop buying them, and your investment really becomes nothing. And the way that the craft brewery market is today, that if a big guy like, let's say, AB InBev dumbs down Goose Island, which
Which they did, but
I don't think, some people say they have. I had a mug of festivity ale from them at Taco Mac earlier this month, and it was out of this world, Tom. It
yeah,
was,
I got to tell you, I did have the festivity this year in the bottle, not on tap, and I was rather impressed by it.
oh, it was good. I mean, I've had it in the bottle in past years, but if they kill the brands off, all that means is that 10 or 20 tiny startup microbrewers are going to pop up and take their place.
Yeah.
That's the way the market is. It's so dynamic for craft beer, is that people are going after a taste. They're not going after a label. And so the macro brewers they're really in a predicament, because they can't kill the beast of craft brews
No,
by buying it.
much to their chagrin, but they can't. Yeah.
Buying it's not going to do it. And they've really got to get into the market. So I think that the acquisitions are not going to result in much difference in the beer from these breweries, because you're really Goose Island. It's like, to use them as an example, if you dumb down the beers, you'll be killing the goose that lays the golden egg, because that's what people want, a good beer, and that's what this revolution is all about. I think we've still got a long way to go in craft beer. We're still at, I mean, what are we at, 7-8% of the total beer market? It's so small that there's loads of room for expansion. So
Yeah, you know what? I've had this conversation too before. That's the difference between macro drinkers and craft beer drinkers. Macro drinkers are very brand specific. Even though most of the flavor profiles on these macro lagers are very similar, you know, a specific regional macro drinker always drinks that beer. It's all he buys. If you're buying a 30 pack, you buy the same one every time. Well, craft beer drinkers aren't necessarily style specific. We may have certain breweries or local breweries that we always go back to, but we're always looking at the stores or the pubs for something new on a tap handle.
yeah, that's in the early days of the craft beer revolution, and I talk back to the very early days, were the mid '80s, the early to mid '80s and beyond, and then it sort of matured a bit in the '90s, but not to the point where the brewers could benefit from the few. The market was really small at that time, but the tendency was the same as you just said. People are like very fickle, and they always want, like, well, I had that beer already, I don't want to buy that again, and so they want something different.
Well, I
And
don't know if fickle's the right word, because you might go back to it. It's just that there's so many choices.
we do.
It's the same with food. I mean, boy, I love the hamburger at this joint, but this one has something wonderful too.
Sure, and
And I don't know, yeah,
that's the way it should be, because whatever your favorite food is, and this is the way I always like to frame that. Whatever you love the most, you wouldn't want it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day of the week, and yet so many people do
yeah,
that with beer, right? The vast majority of beer drinkers, the macro market, that's all they do. They drink their Bud, their Miller, their Coors, and they never drink anything else. So it's like having the same thing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But the difference now is that with craft beer aficionados, we want to. Oh, Earl Koenig. That's a great song, by the way, by Schubert. But we always want something different. But I think the market has grown to the level where now that's a benefit to the brewer, because
It is, yes.
there's enough of a market that people will keep buying different things, but there's enough of them that it'll create enough demand for the brewer to make a profit. And the brewers have got smart too, because they're doing a lot of one-off beers. So where they didn't do that in the 90s, they're doing, they'll brew beer and they'll do it once and they'll sell 1 billion bottles because 1 billion beer geeks have never had that before. And so now next month, they'll do a different one. So they've actually wised up and taken advantage of or really, not taking advantage of us, but actually giving us a little bit of payback for our own, wandering nature, as it were.
So I made a prediction about 95, I guess. I said the brew pub is going to become what, to this generation, what the sports bar was previously. And it turns out I was right, but I was about 15 years off with that prediction, because it didn't hit exactly when I thought it would. There was sort of a big up in the mid-90s, but then it kind of crashed a bit. But since I don't know, what would you say, about 2005, things have just gotten crazy.
I know, well, when I lived in Rhode Island, I lived in Rhode Island up till 2001. And when I was there, we only had a few brew pubs. We had Trinity and Union Station and Providence, and they did pretty well. The laws there, we had Coddington in Newport, and then we had, I think it was Mohegan, no, not Mohegan. I can't think of the name on Block Island. But the laws were pretty draconian, and I think that has a lot to do with it too. The growth of brew pubs is very much dependent on the liberality of the laws in whatever state they're located in. So
you're right. Actually,
you couldn't.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of the laws have changed in some cases, in some areas, regions, very recently. I mean, I know Springfield itself had to make some changes, for the brew pubs or for the breweries that we have here, and that's just happened over the last few years.
Yeah. That's I think it's actually grown upon itself. So Rhode Island's laws didn't allow for growler sales or distribution outside the brew pub. So be that as it may, they didn't really. There wasn't much growth. I went back. I was there in September. And there's quite a few more brew pubs up there now. I went to Brewtopia in Cranston with my brother, and there's more that I could have gone to if I had more time. But today they allow them to sell growlers and do other things that you can't do. Yeah. Here in Georgia, it's sort of, brew pubs here still can't sell growlers to go. We're one of the few states that don't allow that, and the laws, were proposed last year to allow breweries and brew pubs to do that. And unfortunately, the beer distributors are such a potent force in this state that they really killed the bill. It was passed with limited ability for breweries, but not brew pubs, to sell beer to go. But it hasn't. They're trying another bill in the assembly. But to your point, I think the one thing that really has helped brew pubs, maybe this is why it's taken as long for your prediction to come true, is that as some states start to do it, surrounding states say, well, hey, look at these guys eating our lunch, because people are going to these states and they're buying their beer there or whatever, or they just keeping up with the Joneses, or the grass is greener on the other side. That has, I think, really fostered a lot of progressive changes to laws in different states, and that's why you're seeing more growth in brew pubs today. So
yeah, I think you're exactly right. I just popped beer number 2. I'm going to show it to you briefly, and I'll let you talk about your next vintage. This is what would be the correct pronunciation of that?
Earl Koenig.
Earl Koenig.
Elf King.
Oh, yeah, I know it's Elf King. Yeah, I was going to tell you Elf King. Yeah, pale double wheat Bock ale from Urban Chestnuts from the Revolution series. But what Urban Chestnut does, they do 2 series of beer: a Reverence and Revolution. Reverence is actually where they stay exactly true to the style. They stay within that style parameter. The Revolution series they use some creative license, I guess. This is 8%, 20 IBUs, and I had it earlier in the year, and it's just fantastic. And it just came out again, so I had to buy a 4-pack because I just love it. And I've got some stuff I'm getting ready for you. I've got to send some to the beer biker, so I'm going to throw one of them in his box as well. So
He will appreciate that, I think, because I mean, you already gave me some of the beers from Urban Chestnut, and the ones that I tried. First of all, I love German beer. Doppelbocks are my favorite style, and they are just a penultimately American German craft beer, I think, and I thought they were fantastic. So that beer sounds great. That song, I actually learned that in a music class in college.
yeah. They actually it's from the Goethe poem.
Yep.
They actually list some on the bottle here, but yeah. Earlier in the year, White River, another local brewery, does a big FES for an export stout called Shadow Rock, and I did a black and tan using this as the lighter beer, and I layered that. I took a couple pictures because I was able to layer it perfect at home, but it just made a real interesting. I had that combination of German and Irish thing going on, so it was a very interesting beer. But tell me about your next vintage there.
So now I am on the 2013, and that's one in the nose. It's kind of soft like the 2014 was, but it has a little bit more gingerbread than the 2014 did. So the gingerbread and ginger spicing is a little more robust after 2 years. They've all been stored under the same conditions. Man, I could just smell that forever. That is so good. It's like sticking your nose in a piece of gingerbread. Very smooth, chocolatey. It might have developed a slight raisin character that I'm picking up. But the ginger really comes to the fore. A little bit of the spruce. The pine and spruce is not as pronounced as it was in the last two vintages, and that might be the aging. Lightly chocolatey and a little smoother in the finish. Not quite as dry as the newer versions, the new vintages rather, or maltages probably we should say, right?
Maltages. Yeah, there you go. Maltages. I keep making up words too.
Well, I don't think I made that one up. I've seen that used before, but vintage really refers to wine. We probably shouldn't use wine terminology. I have too many wine geek friends that are adamantly convinced that wine is far more complex than beer, and of course we all know that's not the case. So
they would be wrong.
Yeah, I would submit they've never had a Rodenbach Grand Cru or a Chimay Blue. So
there are just so many great. Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, I've been saying for decades now that I think a good craft beer has all the complexity of a fine wine. And basically the difference is about $100.
Yeah, and even at today's beer prices, which are getting pretty expensive, compared to what wine geeks pay for some of the stuff that they like, we get a bargain. I mean, we really get a bargain.
You're right. You know what? I'm a bit of a tightwad, and I've done videos saying so. And sometimes I see a beer for $20, and I kind of grumble to myself. But then I have to stop and think that a wine of that equal quality is going to probably cost at least $50, if not $100. So then I kind of stop myself from grumbling, and I buy that beer.
Yep. I mean, you can age beer like you can with wine, but I think you're right. Beer as a rule is probably better fresh. There are today different opinions on what fresh is. I don't think I think you're like me. You don't think IPA has to be drunk 5 minutes after it gets out.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't pop it the second it's tapped, it's yeah. No, I don't agree with that. But yeah, I'm with you.
For the most part, I think you can age. beer depends on the style. Some of them are drunk best within a few months. Some of them you can age a year or two. Some of them you can age 10, 15, 20 some years. I've had 10 and 12-year-old Chimay that's been fantastic. Affligem beer.
Yeah, I have two. Yeah.
I drank a 60-some-year-old bottle of Ballantine Burton Ale. That I got off eBay. This was back in the 90s. And Douglas Smith, Red Rooster, he and I split a bottle of that. So you can age beer. A lot of it has to do with the conditions and such. But
Well, and a lot of what I've maintained is certain beers will improve with some age. Certain styles, barley wine, for instance, imperial stouts, or most anything whiskey barrel aged. A lighter pilsner isn't going to improve with age. It may not necessarily get any worse though, because I've actually tried this before with certain beers where I've had one 3 years later. Now it didn't improve any, but it didn't suck either. I mean, it wasn't terrible.
no, I mean it's a trial and error process. The goal of aging beer, and I do age a lot of beer. I drink a lot of aged beers, and I'd like to say it's because I am a knowledgeable beer scientist that wants to study beer over time, but I'd be lying if I said that. Most of it's because I am a compulsive beer buyer, and I buy all this beer and I stick it aside and I get ready to drink it, and then I run to Taco Mac and go drink fresh draft beers there, and so the stuff hangs around. There's been times when I've done that and the results have been spectacular, which is really the only reason you should age a beer, is because you want it to improve, right? Otherwise, what's the point? But there's been abysmal failures too. There was a bottle of Bridgeport Highlander, their Scotch ale, and this sometimes happened to me because I'll buy a bottle of it and then I won't drink it, and then a couple of weeks later or a month later, boom, Taco Mac has it on draft. So I run around the corner and I drink it there, and I have it fresh, and I think, okay, well, now that I've had it fresh and I'm not in such a hurry, I'll see how it ages. And I think with the Highlander, I let it sit around for 4 years and it oxidized. It was so, and that's going to happen. But again, there's been times where I've popped a beer that's 4 or 5 years old, and it's just amazing how. And sometimes I had a Westbrook IPA. I had it fresh on draft at Taco Mac, and I like to use this as an example because people are always talking about, well, IPA has to be drunk so fresh, and it was beautiful. And then a year later, I'm poking around in my beer fridge, and I'm like, hey, I bought this can of Westbrook IPA a year ago, and it might have been better than it was when I had it fresh on draft at Taco Mac. It was amazing. So sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and that's what life is all about. So
yeah, you and I have had this conversation before about IPAs. I think we're one of the few guys in craft beer that doesn't think an IPA has to be drank the second it's put into a bottle. I mean, I've had, listen, if you can get something fresh, by all means, if that's the way you want to drink it. But the style was intended to age.
That's right.
Now, my concession out there is that if you want to say there are some American craft IPA styles that are formulated to be drank at a certain time. I mean, if you don't drink them within, X amount of time, they're not going to taste the same. Okay, I will hand you that concession. But you can't tell me the beer is going to go magically bad in 90 days or 30 days or 10 days or 5 days.
No.
Just because there's a date on a bottle doesn't mean if you drink it that day after, it just, you open the bottle and it just turns to dust, because that just doesn't happen. And it's pure ignorance to think that way.
Yeah, it's all about how I think it's worded. And I think today's beer geeks are really enamored of extremely hoppy beers, IPAs, the so-called session IPAs that are very thin malty loaded, and super loaded, front loaded with hops, because they want that blast of hop flavor, and that's all well and good. And if you like that, by all means, you should drink that, and then you should drink your IPAs fresh. But then when you come forth and say, oh, I've heard that IPA is not a style that ages well, that's where the disconnect comes in for me, because you're wrong. You might, if you want your IPAs hoppy, go ahead and drink them. But the original ones, at the time, they were meant to take the current style that was very popular, which was pale ale, and ramp it up with hops and alcohol, and ship it over to India. And of course, it would mellow on the sea voyage. And a lot of times they would put it in oak barrels, and that would add some character. But by the time they got it, it mellowed down, and it would be a little bit closer to the pale ale.
But still hoppier than a traditional pale.
Still hoppy. So it can age. It was designed to age, just like you said. And, that's great. But, if I like them both ways. I love an aged IPA to see how it's changed. But if you want the hop blast, drink them fresh, just don't tell me that they can't age, because that's what they were designed for. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't say they're going bad. Hops are a natural preservative.
Exactly.
So if you've got a beer if you've got a double IPA that has 100 IBUs, it's not going bad in 30 days. It's not going bad in 60 days. It's not going bad in 90 days. It's not even going bad in 120 days. Now, will it eventually change character? Yes, it will. But it is not going bad.
Well, that's what drives me nuts about, as much as I love Stone beers, their Enjoy By series. Let's get real.
It's brilliant marketing is what it is. It's
of course
absolutely brilliant marketing.
They're taking advantage of the beer geeks that don't know any better, and they're selling a beer that's what I mean. Is it close to 100 IBUs and 10% alcohol, and saying, but you've got to drink it within a couple of months. That beer will last a year or two. At that alcohol level and that with that much hops, let's be real.
If you pop it past that date, it'll just be dust.
Yeah.
An arrow will pop out of the bottle. It'll be no good anymore.
Yeah.
So tell us about you got one more vintage, right, John?
One more. I got the 2012.
Tell us about the one more vintage you got.
Luckily, this was the year that the world was supposed to end, but luckily it did not. So I still have this beer to drink. This is the 2012. And again, it's amazing to me how well this beer. I'm getting the soft gingerbread again in the nose, a little bit of the piney spruce, but the nose is it's well preserved here. This one's a little thinner in body than the other ones, but that's not an aging. That must be just the character of the beer for that particular year. Maybe a little bit of actually there's some really luscious, bittersweet, dark chocolate coming through it, and the ginger flavors are poking through. Pine and dry nutmeg in the finish. They never tell you what the spices are that they use. Anchor is pretty. It's almost like the Colonel's secret recipe. They don't want to.
They're a little cagey, yeah.
And they change, and they say they change it, but I'm sure it's pretty much the same ingredients, and it's just a proportional change from year to year. But it's great. It's like I feel like there's like a gingerbread man running around my mouth, wiping a piece of a Christmas tree against the.
There you go.
But it's just amazing to me how well that beer stands up. I've done it. This is 4 years of this one. I don't think I've ever compared 4 years of this beer before.
You've done it with Bigfoot, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I did 6 years of Bigfoot. That was fun. The next day was not fun, but that.
No, I bet you.
But that night was a lot of fun. I'll tell you. So
let me ask you a question before we wrap up this particular session. Let's just say, by miracle, Anchor is checking their warehouse and they find these vintages or maltages. Would you purchase them again right now? I mean, right this second, knowing that they've aged, 2-3 years.
Well, it depends on how they've, I'm sure that in their warehouse the conditions are pretty conducive to aging beer. I would hope that's the case. And so if they are stored under the proper conditions, then yeah, I would buy them.
You could buy the 2012, 2013, 2014 again. You'd pick them up.
Yeah, they're. I don't think they're better, but it's interesting to see the differences over time, and they're still delicious. I mean, I'm enjoying them, and that's the thing. I don't think they're. It's hard to tell because especially with a beer like Anchor, our special ale,
Mhm.
because in fact, Bigfoot might be a better analogy. Bigfoot is the same beer year after year, or at least Sierra Nevada doesn't say that they change it from year to year. So with our special ale, with Bigfoot anyway, the aging sometimes I found improved the beer because the hops mellowed a bit, and that allowed the yeastiness and the malty flavors to come through a little bit more to the fore. So there might be certain vintages or maltages rather, that I would want to buy. This one's different because since they change it, it's hard to tell if the beer's improved over time or has changed over time, or maybe the recipe was just a little bit different that particular year. But they're all fantastic. Yeah, I think I would do that. They're that good. I think there's a lot of beer geeks that would like to do
Oh
that.
yeah, I would. I mean, if they anytime that happens, well, I mean, Mothers, for instance, just put out Mothers hasn't done their barley wine for 2014 and 2015, but about a month ago, I guess, they had a couple cases that they put it for sale from their 2013 vintage. So I bought 3 4 packs that I was able to pick up, and that thing is just gorgeous. Now it's a barley wine. It's not it's their barley wine anyway is 10% 44 IBU, so it's not a lot of hoppage anyway. But I mean, aging, that beer has just aged beautifully in 2 years. It is more complex. It is more nuanced. It is just amazing after 2 years.
Yeah, Southern Tier's done that too with Pumpkin. They've released prior years batches of that. But I mean, as I continue to sip this 2012, it's just it comes out a little bit more to me that it's like a chocolate eggnog. The spices and the creaminess, and it's just amazing how good this beer is. But we shouldn't be surprised with Anchor. I mean,
No,
if you want to talk about craft beer, there would be probably none without Anchor. As much as I think Sam Adams and Jim Cook deserve a lot of credit for the expansion of craft beer and making it a household word because he made it so ubiquitous.
mhm.
It was I have to say that even before Sam Adams was available in Rhode Island, before it was available in many parts of the country. But even before we had Sam Adams there, I was drinking Anchor Liberty Ale. I was drinking Anchor Steam. We didn't have our special ale, but Anchor beers were there. And so Fritz Maytag and Anchor are, that's they are a pioneer and a founding pillar of craft beer. So.
And New Albion is another one that deserves a footnote that tends to get overlooked.
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of people don't know who New Albion was, but
I don't think I'm not even sure we'd have Sam Adams if it wasn't for New Albion.
well, I don't.
That brewer was very influential to many, many future craft brewers.
Yeah, Cook picked the brand up. Jim Cook picked the brand up, and did it a few
Yeah.
years ago. But yeah, but I think Mendocino and Sierra Nevada and Thousand Oaks in California, which is long gone, but one of the breweries I think of as one of the early pioneers, and Boulder in Colorado, we had that in the early to
Yeah, I love Boulder. Yeah.
so and then the regionals, like Saranac, they were around, and August Shell and some of those other great brewers.
August Shell. I don't think I've had some August Shell beers, and you know what? I enjoy them. I don't know if they ever hit that outstanding, but I don't think they're crafted badly. I've had some that I really enjoyed from August Shell.
No, today that's the case, but I'll tell you what, back in the early '80s, they were better than a lot of the stuff that was on the shelf, and they were there. Utica Club from Saranac and
Yeah.
some of their other beers. These are regional
Yeah,
beers.
I agree. I like Saranac. They're kind of dissed by a lot of craft beer snobs these days, but I like them.
They're a great introductory beer to people that just as Sam Adams, some of the Sam Adams beers. But when I worked in a liquor store in the '90s, And I used to sell Saranac like crazy. Saranac and Sam Adams were two great stepping stones for people to get into craft beer. So,
Well, I just noticed that I didn't give any tasting for this wonderful beer from Urban Chestnut, and well, I'm not going to now either. I'm too far into it. But I mean, I just want to say that it is a great beer. It's one of my personal favorites.
oh, you've got to be able to reflect on it to some point, Tom.
Feel good all over. Was that John?
You've got to be able to reflect to some point. Give us a little description of it. I'm curious.
The nose is a little sweet, soft wheat. You do feel a little bit of alcohol, but not in a negative way, if that makes any sense to you. You know it's there, but it's not off-putting. The flavor is just big wheat. It's a little sweet. It's very soft on the palate. That 8% is rather deceptive. It's just a very nice beer. And everything. I'm just a big fan of Urban Chestnut. I've been talking about these guys ever since their inception. I mean, them and Four Hands. I think people always want to talk about perennial artists in St. Louis, and they are doing some fine beers. But if you really want, for me, the two that are really putting St. Louis on the map for craft beer is Four Hands and Urban Chestnut. For me, it's those two that are really doing some awful darn fine stuff.
Well, the ones that I've tried that you sent me, and I still have a few more. Extremely impressive. So I can see why you feel that way.
So I want to thank John for joining me for this session. As we wrap it up, John, you want to say any final words?
No, life is short. Drink good beer.
That's exactly right. Drink good beer, have a good time, and don't take shit so seriously.
That's it. Yep.
As the great Jim Morrison once said, nobody here gets out alive. I am Tom the Beer Whisperer. I am just honored to have one of my favorite beer reviewers on the planet here with me tonight, John Bruguru. Thanks for joining me. I hope you join me back at the pub again.
Will do, Tom. It's been fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you later.